Hello, all viewers of the video. It is me, the same old fish, within a brand new video. That's the intro we're going for here. I got nothing. Before we even get into the discussion here, some of you who are especially observant and read the title of the video probably realize that I've already talked about this franchise before. And yes, it was my first video, in fact, back in the primitive days of 2020, back when my editing skills were subpar, but they still are now. So now it's time to continue this story by talking about the sequel, Plants vs. Zombies 2, It's About Time. Now, you're probably sitting at your desk right now watching this video and telling me, oh, but what about Plants vs. Zombies Adventures? Shouldn't that be the next one to talk about? Well, yeah, sure, maybe. It was technically the next game in the series, but not only is that an old Facebook game that doesn't really work anymore, but I also just don't feel like playing it. I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could try and get a version of it working, but not today. Maybe another time. Anyways, enough of that. Back to important business. Plants vs. Zombies 2 was announced on August 12th, but didn't come out until July 9th, 2013, a little less than a year later. I remember flipping out when the first trailer of the game dropped. As a kid, the original PVZ was always my favorite mobile game. I could argue that it was my favorite game period until I got my first Nintendo handheld, the 3DS, and I wasn't the only one. The first game was a massive success, so it's not a surprise that this first trailer got people excited. At the time, the idea of more Plants vs. Zombies was unheard of. If you remember back on my first video on the original Plants vs. Zombies, I thought very highly of the game. I even went as far to call it a masterpiece. And I still live by that statement. The game still holds up super well and is still very fun and engaging to play, but I digress. If you want to hear more about the first game, you can watch that video later. But for today, let's continue my quest to cover all the Plants vs. Zombies games and see if the second in the series can hold its own as well as the first.
Welcome everyone once again back into VGT with VG5. I'm your host, VG5, with a wonderful talker here today. He's a duck who likes crackers, meatloaf and solving mysteries. Everyone give a warm welcome to our very own Finmill detective, Quackers.
Why, hello! Truly is a pleasure to be here on this fine day.
Yes. Now, Quackers, I'd like to know, what is your experience with video games?
That's an interesting question. As a young chap, I played them fairly often. Even though I never had the same luxuries as humans at the time, my parents always found a way to get me the new console at the time. I don't know how, but to be frank, I think that's one mystery I'd rather not solve myself.
And pray tell, what console do you have the most fond memories of?
The SNES is without a doubt my favorite. There were many games on there I would play endlessly as a duckling. Super Mario, Zelda, F-Zero, all the works. Back then, video games fascinated me to no end, being basically my entire life before I became a detective. But sadly, nowadays, I just haven't had the time to play them very often in between my work. But every now and again, I'll dust off my collection.
How sweet. Well folks, that's all the time we have for this week. Catch us next time on VGT with VG5 for more enthralling histories about video games and possibly some less than desirable histories too. Who knows? I'm your host VG5, signing off.
If the title of the game, It's About Time, wasn't an obvious clue enough already as to what this game's about, I'll give you a basic rundown of the game's premise. Just like in the first game, you're fighting zombies on your lawn, except this time through time. Anyways, the plot here is still very simple despite being time travel related. Crazy Dave wants his taco, go get it. Really, the concept of time travel is more of an excuse to try out different styles for zombies and plants. Which, yeah, are pretty cool to see. While we're on the subject, I suppose it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, this game's new art style. I didn't talk about it much in the first video, but I do think the original PVZ art style is pretty nice. It hasn't aged horribly and has a certain level of charm to it that I think is quite cool to look back at. So PVZ2's art style? It's good. That's all. Yeah, I'm just messing with you. The new art style here is actually rather great. The first game definitely had a charm to it that many others didn't, and yeah, I would have preferred that one, but it's very hard to deny that the new one isn't really good too. It's obvious they had to update it for the sequel, and I think they took it in the right direction. It's different enough, but still recognizable to the point where it stands out well. The colors of everything pop out more, and the plants especially look way more expressive than they did in the original, which is really saying a lot. Normally from here I would talk about the game's soundtrack, but honestly I don't have too much to say about it. Unlike the first game's soundtrack where I thoroughly enjoyed almost every song used, I find the second game's OST to be a lot more hit or miss. Most songs used are more average over anything else. This doesn't mean there aren't any standout ones in here, however. Most of the songs throughout Neon Mixtape Tour in modern day are all super good and memorable, but sadly the other songs don't stand up as high compared to those great ones for me, which is a shame because you can tell how much was put into the game's soundtrack. But as predicted, I know why you're all here, and as I struggle to find more interesting ways to transition segments, let's move on to the gameplay. The gameplay is pretty similar to the first game, surprise surprise. It sticks to the tower defense style that the first game adhered to, where your house is on one side of the lawn and the zombies come out of the other. Simple. The basic gameplay has basically been copy-pasted from the original PVZ with a few enhancements added. The differences arise from what they added onto the basic gameplay structure. The main one to note is plant food. Plant food is a way to power up your plants for a one-time use ultimate move. These moves vary from plant to plant depending upon what said plant is. For example, the pea shooter shoots out multiple peas for massive damage when given plant food, while a plant like the walnut increases its defense. Not all of these abilities are winners, with some making you question what the developers were thinking when implementing them into the game, but for the most part, these are all really fun additions to the game that can make strategizing more in-depth than before. There's also been a load of new plants added, which most of them, emphasize on most, are really interesting and cool. As earlier mentioned, each world in the game has a different theme correlating to different periods of time. What makes this interesting is how each world and theme has its own gameplay gimmick to accompany it. Ancient Egypt has sandstorms that sporadically appear. Pirate Seas has plank tiles that ground plants can't be planted on in water pits. Wild West has mine carts that can be moved around. Frostbite Caves has snowstorms that can freeze your plants. Lost City has special tiles that can do different things when planted on, like give sun, cause a line of fire, and throw a boulder down that can kill zombies and plants. Far Future also has special tiles that can link plant food effects when used from plant to plant. Dark Ages has the returning nighttime mechanic from the first game where sun doesn't fall from the sky. Neon Mixtape Tour uses the awesome mechanic of having music cues determine what special zombies activate when, like only having the punk zombie do his special kicking attack when his music is playing, and so on and so forth. Jurassic Marsh, on the other hand, uses an annoying mechanic of having the zombies be helped by various forms of dinosaurs, like being taken all the way to the front lines and given a speed boost. Big Wave Beach, these mechanics, yeah. And finally, Modern Day has portals that open up, which allows for multiple zombies from past worlds to come onto the field. Now, obviously, some of these aren't as good as others, but collectively, all of these gimmicks adds to the gameplay to spicing up the base standard and allows each world to be more unique. There are many more gimmicks added to this game, like power-ups, the travel log, and costumes, but those can be brought up another time. They're all interesting and fun additions, excluding one, but I have other more important things to talk about here. Like the arena. The arena is probably my new favorite side mode added to PVZ 2, probably because it's the most fleshed out. The whole gist here is that you compete against other quote-unquote players in small challenges that all have various themes and restrictions added onto them. The more zombies you kill, the more points you get, and the person with the most points in the end wins the match. The more wins you obtain nets you higher rewards and higher leagues. After every week, the theme and leagues reset and you either rank up or down a league depending upon where you place. Anyway, yeah, the arena is a pretty great addition to the game. It's pretty much just an excuse for the devs to put together more extreme levels that couldn't go into the main world. But that doesn't mean this mode is perfect, however. The players I mentioned earlier that you fight against are actually just bots. They don't even try to hide this fact either. I remember when this feature was first released and I had to go do something when I was in an arena match, so I paused my game, fully expecting to be kicked out of the game when I came back. But alas no, I was still there in the same spot as I was before with the same person still playing. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out what's going on here, but again, I digress. Penny's Pursuit is the other primary side mode that is similar to the arena in concept. You are given a set amount of stages that have similar but generally more challenging obstacles like the arena gives. These stages also reset and reform, but not in the same general time frame as the arena. These are fun and definitely worth playing through, but many of them are widely unfair and not particularly worth it for the rewards alone. Other than those two, there are also some smaller side modes. Pinata Party is the most obvious one to note, and is probably my second favorite new mode added. The whole idea behind Pinata Party is that every day there's a new level given to you, with these levels varying depending upon the season and occasionally for special events. Not every level is a winner, and eventually they started to reuse levels for each Pinata Party, but I still think this is a fun way to get people to play the game every day. Phase Breaker returns from the first game, which is cool to see, but is very pointless and doesn't have nearly as much to it as in the original. Still though, glad they brought it back, at least in some way, instead of completely neglecting it like all the other mini-games. You're probably noticing a pattern here that I like almost everything about the game, right? Well, there's a reason for that. I've been keeping most of the negative stuff for now because I think it deserves its own section. Let me tell you my problems with this game and what the meaning of the title is. So if you're still somehow invested in this video, you all know about EA, right? Well, for the three of you that don't, EA is a company that usually creates games and are generally known for being a not really great company. Well, in between PVZ 1 and 2, EA bought PopCap, the publishers and copyright holders of the Plants vs. Zombies franchise. This means EA had a general influence on PVZ 2. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like everybody else that says that all the game's problems are the direct cause of EA, because they aren't, but that doesn't mean they are completely void of the blame. The biggest outlier for me personally in this game is the microtransactions. Hey, you remember in the first Plants vs. Zombies, microtransactions were basically non-existent and to the side, and how every plant was free? And hey, you know about Plants vs. Zombies too? In the year 2023 that we are currently in, I don't think I need to tell you how scummy it is that some plants cost real-world money, when the first game gave you pretty much every plant for free. This topic has been talked about and explored countless times, and I know everything I say here has been said many times in the past. And yeah, this stuff is annoying and greedy, but it doesn't particularly ruin my enjoyment of the game as a whole. So, are there other bad things in this game that I have problems with other than the microtransactions? Well, yeah, obviously. I didn't save the bad things for last without a reason. Aside from the microtransactions and constant ads, One of the biggest problems I have with the game is the way the plants are treated. For one, there are many plants in the game that are either extremely underpowered, extremely overpowered, or just flat out a copy of an existing plant. The first game wasn't void of these either, but it's much more apparent here, especially considering how many more plants this game has compared to the first. I'm probably the only one with this problem though. Something I know I'm not the only one who has a problem with, however, is the leveling system. Now, on paper, the idea of a leveling system for plants is an interesting one, but the way it's executed is where it fails for me and many others. Leveling up works in a way where you get seed packets across many different modes as one of the primary rewards. This on its own is kind of annoying because it makes it very hard to get the seed packets for the specific plants that you want, and many times leads to having an abundance of ones you don't want, or for premium plants you don't want to waste your money on. But that's not all. The way the leveling system itself works is also a problem. Each time a plant levels up, it gets stronger in various ways depending upon the plant. Again, on paper, a good idea, but combined with how you get seed packets and how each plant gets an inconsistent amount of upgrades per level up, this causes the balance to be even worse and makes even more plants useless. So, what else? I mean, I would love to complain about how the main adventure feels incomplete without the harder levels that got removed, or how bad the power-up system is, but I think you've all gotten the point by now. So I think it's about time I put all of these loosely connected thoughts into summary. If you're particularly observant, you've probably realized that this video has a very different feel from the first. In the first, I praised the original and had very little to complain about, but this time I've had plenty of problems on top of the great stuff, albeit some being a little nitpicky. But honestly, this game is pretty great. Despite its flaws, you can tell how much effort the developers put into this game, especially in the graphics department. I mean, yeah, what more is there for me to say? This game's good, but flawed. I have a very love-hate relationship with PVZ 2, plain and simple, and I'm okay with that. Not every game has to be a masterpiece. But the one thing I'll never forgive is the removal of Digger Zombie. They could have had a perfect game on their hands, but they threw it all away by removing the best zombie in the first game. 0 out of 10.